Long ago, in Japan's biggest pleasure quarters, there was a beautiful courtesan with a strange name. Other ladies of pleasure chose elegant, poetic names like Evening Mist and Spring Meadow, but this lady called herself Jigoku, or Hell. Why did she do this? Well, she had an interesting life, and by interesting, I mean horrifying. The world had done her wrong, but instead of blaming the world, she looked inwards and blamed herself. Until she met a monk who drank, ate meat, and slept with women. This is the famous folk tale of the Hell Courtesan. A nervous mother was carrying her young daughter on her back. Her other daughter walked quickly by her side. Their home was no longer safe. She had just learned that her husband had died in battle, and they needed to flee. Her only comfort was that her son was already safe under the care of a Buddhist priest. But dangerous were the roads of medieval Japan, and they were about to learn how dangerous. 2 bandits came across the family, and without hesitation, they killed the mother. Her poor daughters they sold to a lady who turned out to actually love children. She loved selling them to brothels. One tragic day, the woman locked the older sister in a storehouse. With neither food, nor water, nor a drop of compassion, the girl starved. The younger sister was eventually sold to a brothel. The girl's name was Otoboshi, and she was 3 years old. Otoboshi worked for the brothel, first as a servant, then when she was older, a prostitute. She changed her name to Jigoku, or Hell. Jigoku grew up to be a smart, beautiful, and charming woman, qualities that pushed her up to the highest rank a courtesan could reach, the rank of Taiyu, or Dayū. For someone of such status, her name didn't really fit, because Jigoku was a slang word for streetwalker prostitutes, one of the lowest types of prostitutes at the time. Only she thought it made perfect sense. Jigoku worked day after day, seeing men after men. A rotten life, she thought, for a rotten person. Not a day went by that she didn't blame herself. For what? No one knew. Until one day, the name of this mysterious courtesan wafted through the city and slipped into the ears of a Buddhist monk, who decided he was curious enough to pay her a visit. Now, it was quite odd for a monk to visit a brothel, is what you might think if you haven't been watching my videos. It wasn't odd at all. Still, it was against Buddhist rules. But this was no ordinary pervy monk. He was one of the most famous monks in Japanese history. At the brothel, a servant thought it was just some drunk causing trouble and said, "Stop causing trouble, you drunk." The monk misplaced his zen and cursed out the servant so much the brothel walls blushed. Unfortunately, when you insult one servant, you insult them all, and all of the brothel's workers came out, prepared to send this monk to the Buddhist paradise. It was at that moment that a courtesan walked towards them, hips swinging like a sexy pendulum. All shouting ceased, and all eyes turned to her, the Jigoku Dayū, her kimono full of art of flames and demons from hell. If that wasn't enough, the crowd was hit with another shock. This monk introduced himself as Ikkyu, and everyone gasped. They had all heard stories of a kind of wacky monk who roamed the country spreading his own version of Zen Buddhism. He sometimes carried a human skull around on a stick to show how nothing was permanent. He loved the rules and authority as much as a cat loves baths, and rumor had it that he didn't even shy away from sex. Ikkyu was a smiling, proud wanderer, a folk hero. After Jigoku made a full recovery from the monk's lethal introduction, she invited him to her room. They exchanged some poems that would have made a normal person reach for a dictionary. At one point, Ikkyu began a poem. "Though I had heard of hell, seeing the real thing is more daunting still." By hell, he was talking about her. But the poem also works when speaking of the actual hell. Jigoku finished the poem. "Even the living who draw near cannot but fall into the abyss," meaning everyone who comes near me falls for me. And she decided to demonstrate this. She ordered servants to bring sake and vegetarian food for Ikkyu to get the seduction started. But Ikkyu did something unexpected. He said, "No, please bring hot broth and fish instead." Now, Buddhist monks were not supposed to harm animals, and any fisherman will tell you that eating a fish tended to be quite harmful to it. So, as Ikkyu was having fish, Jigoku was having doubts. "Is this the real Ikkyu?" she thought, "or even a real monk? I must test his moral character." She slipped out and sent a bunch of girls into his room to sing and dance while she watched their shadows from outside. But slowly, the shadows started looking a bit odd, kind of skinny, almost like skeletons. Fighting an unsettling coldness, she peeked inside and nearly fell. She had never seen anything like it. The dancers were not flesh and blood humans, they were skeletons, and the monk was dancing with them, as drunk as an empty cup. Jigoku knew this was no ordinary man. She stepped back into the room, and the skeletons turned back into women. Ikkyu passed out. She and a maid carried him back to her chambers. Surely nothing else weird would happen that night, surely. In the middle of the night, the monk woke up and dragged his monkish body to the veranda, all under the one watchful eye of Jigoku. The monk threw up into the pond below, but as his dinner hit the water, it turned back into a live fish. Jigoku was not used to seeing dinner change its mind like that. Ikkyu made his way to the door to leave, but she wrapped her arms around him, thinking she could seduce him to stay. She still had some questions. It was then that Ikkyu understood her poem from before. But still, he resisted, chanting, "Monju Bosatz had no interest in women. I am without eyes. I am without eyes." What the heck's a Monju Bosatsu? That would be the bodhisattva of wisdom and intellect, kind of like a god. Some Japanese texts say this bodhisattva created male-male sex. Jigoku was sure this was the real Ikkyu. He was a monk who didn't follow the usual rules. He ate meat, drank, and yes, slept with women. To him, sex was part of the human experience, and engaging in sex only deepened your understanding of enlightenment. Jigoku asked him for help and told him her story and of why she changed her name to Jigoku. She believed that her wretched life was due to bad karma from past lives, where she did not follow the Buddhist path. She had no doubt that after death she would end up in hell, so she chose the name Jigoku and wore clothes with hellish artwork as a sort of self-punishment for her sins. Her mind had never known peace, it only knew shame and the fear of hell. Ikkyu leaned forward and shared with her an important lesson about skeletons and enlightenment. He said, "Earlier I chanted, 'I am without eyes.' Without eyes, meeting the most attractive women in the world would be no different from meeting a skeleton wrapped in a stinking bag of flesh. If you can understand this, you can't be led down the wrong path." Tears in her eyes, Jigoku vowed to cut her hair and become a nun. Ikkyu immediately said, "No! The work of prostitutes is much more pure than that of hypocritical monks and nuns. Try something else," and gave her his fly whisk to help her out. A fly whisk, or hosu, is a tool to swat flies. Buddhist monks can't kill living beings, therefore monks use this thing to shoo away flies so they can return a second later. Over time, the fly whisk became a Buddhist symbol. It could symbolically brush away desires and distractions from the mind. Jigoku had a special chair made and sat on it every day, holding the whisk and meditating. Sometime later, Ikkyu returned. He watched her meditate for a while, then walked up and smashed her chair into pieces. He announced that she had reached enlightenment and no longer needed the chair. Some say that in a past life, Ikkyu was a drama student. From that day, Jigoku was at peace and did her job like a skeleton wrapped in flesh, no longer worried about her work being sinful. She did good deeds like giving to the poor, until one day she fell sick. The illness only got worse as the days passed. On the 45th day, Jigoku was sure that it was her last. She asked for Ikkyu, who came with a male disciple, Gosuke. This disciple looked like he got lost one day and accidentally wandered into Buddhism, because he didn't shave his head or wear Buddhist clothing at all. By her side, Ikkyu confessed something surprising. On the night they stayed together, he noticed 7 moles on her right arm and realized that she was otoboshi. How he knew about the moles, I'm not sure. There must have been some history there. Ikkyu then said his disciple Gosuke was her long-lost brother that he had agreed to take care of long ago. The two siblings embraced and spilled warm tears that had been waiting over a decade for release. With 2 other ladies accompanying her, Jigoku played the koto and sang. When the song ended, she fell onto the koto and died. Ikkyu then did something that angered everyone. He forbade them from burying Jigoku's body and told them to leave her body in the field to rot. While everyone was in an uproar, the monk asked Gosuke to look under her pillow. Sure enough, he found a note signed by Jigoku asking for her body to be left in a field. How convenient. And so they did. After 49 days, Ikkyu checked the corpse. Nothing was left but bones. When the monk picked them up, he found that the bones were all connected. It was a perfectly connected skeleton, proof that she was no ordinary woman and that she did achieve enlightenment. Ikkyu burned the bones, and from the flames emerged 7 stars that leapt into the sky. There are many Japanese folk tales about mysterious, beautiful women. Check this one out, about a foxy wife who was not as she seemed. We have a new emperor on Patreon today, Heresy Wayne. Hope I got that right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We also have some regular patron, Jake Noah Hoffman, a patron of the arts, Witchy Moss, Big Sensei 91, and Brendan Russell. You're all amazing. Alright, I love you, and spread the knowledge.